fuels and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
Opinions expressed on the Friday Media Roundtable are those of our panelists and do not necessarily reflect the views of WJCT News.
It's the biggest stories from the week. I'm Melissa Ross, and just ahead this hour on First Coast Connect, we round up the week's top stories across the region with our Friday Media Roundtable. Everything from the city's final budget proposal from Mayor Curry and what that means for your bills, a conversation with one of the candidates for sheriff, and more. Then later in the hour, what does it mean to be well in this time of COVID, which drags on and on? A look inside the new exhibition at Yellow House. That and more ahead. Keep listening. It's all coming your way right after the news.
And the time is now 1 minute after 9. This is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Mayor Lenny Curry's final budget proposal as mayor includes a property tax cut and updates to 121 Financial Ballpark. As WJCT News' Raymond Troncoso reports, Curry presented his $1.5 billion spending plan to the City Council yesterday morning.
The proposed budget for the next fiscal year is about $100 million higher than the current budget, and $67 million of that increase is earmarked for the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office and the Fire and Rescue Department.
My commitment to public safety has never wavered, and once again, that's reflected in this budget. We continue to work to build stronger relationships between law enforcement and the communities they serve.
JSO's $540 million budget alone will take up over a third of the entire general fund, and together with JFRD, takes up nearly 60%. Other increases include $4 million for libraries, which will go towards a branch in Ocean Way, the city's newest since 2006. Sizable bumps for park services and public works round out the proposed spending. And in the separate capital improvement plan for development and infrastructure, the mayor's proposal allocates nearly $500 million for new and ongoing projects, including river bulkhead and city drainage improvements. Raymond Troncoso, WJCT News 89.9.
Free food is being distributed in Jacksonville Saturday for households in need. Farm Share, along with Grasp Academy, a Duval program for students with dyslexia, is giving out fresh produce and non-perishables Saturday morning, starting at 7 o'clock at Grasp's campus on Justina Road. It's now 81 degrees here in Jacksonville, a partly cloudy sky, a 30 to 40% chance of rain today. And that rain should move in anytime after 3.
Jack's Mayor Lenny Curry presents his final budget proposal and says we need a property tax cut. Some voters have confusion over how to vote in next month's primary election, and a conversation with one of the candidates running to replace Sheriff Mike Williams. Some of the stories making headlines this week. Good Friday morning. We're live from Studio 5. I'm Melissa Ross, and this is First Coast Connect. Thanks for listening. Just ahead, all of the biggest stories of the week with our Friday Roundtable. It's 549-2937 to join us. Then later, a preview of the new exhibition at the city's Yellow House on being well, something we all have been focused on in these times. But first, it's Friday. And here to discuss a busy news week, we welcome, for the first time to the panel, Jim Piggott of WJXT Channel 4, the local station. Hi, Jim. It's so good to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us. And also rounding out our fabulous foursome, sitting here in studio as well, regular contributor Charles Greggs.
Good morning, Melissa.
Good morning. David Bauerlein from the Florida Times-Union. Hey, David.
Good morning, Melissa.
And joining us virtually, regular contributor and blogger Fred Matthews. Hey, Fred.
Good morning, Melissa. It's good to see Jim Piggott there.
You know, I always get my man sooner or later. It only took 13 years.
I'm not going there.
Okay. Lots to talk about this week, and we'll go to your calls in a moment. 549-2937. We are live on the radio and on video stream. Watch us on Facebook and YouTube. Drop us a line on Facebook. Tweet me at Melissa in Jax. Let's start with our top story. Jacksonville Mayor Lenny Curry gave his 8th and final budget address this week, and he asked the city council to slightly reduce the property tax rate for a general fund budget that will total $1.55 billion. Now, there's a separate list of capital improvement projects clocking in at $500 million. So the mayor is saying let's have a slight property tax cut as part of this balanced budget. This is happening, though, just as the Duval County Public Schools is asking voters to approve a property tax increase to pay for teachers' salaries and other educational priorities. We begin the hour with a closer look, and we want your calls. 549-2937. Emails to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. Tweets to @MelissaInJax. Facebook open. Jim Piggott, let's begin with you. What stands out to you in this budget?
Obviously, that millage rate cut is what everybody was waiting to hear. And it was expected because the mayor had tweeted that that was going to happen. How much we didn't know. And it's such a small amount that it's really not going to make a big effect on your tax bill. You know, I think we were trying to do the numbers and crunching some of the numbers there and say you have like a $200,000 home since values went up. You would save $17, $18 on your bill, but the assessed value of your property is going to be so much more that you're really not going to notice it. But it is a cut, and that is one thing. And talking to city council members after the fact, after the mayor's address, and they were wondering, you know, is it worth it? Joyce Morgan was one that was mentioning that and wondering, we've got to discuss this. You know, could that money, since you're really not going to see much of that, go somewhere else to do something else. The mayor, though, did bring up a lot of interesting things that we hadn't heard in previous budgets, and that's really building up the reserves. And we saw in past years that has been a problem, not having that excess money, particularly when we had the storms, when Irma and Hurricane Matthew came through. They needed some of that, and it was talked we needed to build up these reserves. We heard in years past when the budget was so short that, you know, they wished that they had this. So now they've got excess money because of property values. That's a good thing. You had mentioned the capital improvements projects, a lot going on with that all along the river. I think that was a highlight of that budget of what was going to be happening. People were asking about public safety. The mayor talked about a new fire station this year, several down the lines, renovating others as well. But, you know, there's no police officers actually being hired. We're having some from past grants that are coming in. And that was some concern, at least from the Northside Coalition. They wanted to hear more from the Sheriff's Department and being held accountable. But to me, some of the, as I mentioned, I'm just go quickly to that, the highlight of that budget was that cut. And the fact that, you know, I asked the mayor, why can't you cut more? And he had said, you know, well, really, we think this is responsible because we can build up those reserves.
And that is important. David Bauerlein, how does this square, though, the mayor calling for a reduction in the property tax rate with this competing measure over across the river, the school board asking people to pay a little more in their property taxes?
It's a tough environment for that type of a sell for the school board because people are concerned about inflation. They see they're paying more for so many things, and then you go to them and ask them, okay, and now pay more for your property taxes at a time where, as Jim mentioned, your assessed value, taxable value is already going up. So even if your tax rate doesn't change, you're paying a lot more at tax time. So it's a difficult environment. Now, I will say that unlike the city, which has not decreased its property tax rate in a decade, and even now it's just a very nominal decrease, the school board, forced by the legislature really, which controls this, has really cut its millage rate over the past decade. So in a way, they've reduced it, and now if they were to add this 1 mil, it's still going to be less than what it was, say, 10 years ago. So, but, you know, can you make that sale to people when they're worried about paying a lot more for gas and utilities and all those other things that are really squeezing them? They really have a real challenge to make that case.
Inflation is real. We're all feeling it. Charles Gregg's paying more for gas, food, other things, rent through the roof. City Council members Leanna Cumber and Garrett Dennis have asked the city to give people a bit of a gas tax holiday to give people some relief. The mayor's not in favor of that. What about that?
Yeah, well, many people aren't in favor of short-term fixes for that type of long-term pain. But what's interesting about the budget, though, in this process is that this is the administration's call, how they would like to project spending money. Their priorities are set. But the real work comes when the city council budget review process begins. This is where the representation of the city council has to stand up and represent their constituents, because citizens don't really have a way to have direct input into the budget. This is where they have an opportunity to influence their council members and get them to speak up on their behalf related to the money that's being proposed or the projects that's being proposed. What's going on really here is that the city has a windfall right now. We're in good times, and so some people would like for them to be more creative with how they spend the money and address some of the issues that are more consistent with their problems within their own communities and their neighborhoods. And if they don't feel like this budget represents that, then the council member has to stand up and make that known during the budget review process. A lot of horse trading needs to go on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Fred Matthews, in this budget, as the guys have been mentioning, dozens of projects, and this is going to be seen in your neighborhood, folks. Everything from resurfacing streets to improving parks, money to build a new library branch in Ocean Way, money for resiliency projects to counter the impact of climate change. At the same time, Jacksonville area lawmakers are seeking millions in state money for a bunch of projects: road work, hospital beds, the Navy Ship Museum in downtown Jacksonville. So lots of money is going to be floating around, and we will be seeing some of the improvements.
Well, we will. I think that, it wouldn't be very much of a Republican-dominated budget if we didn't get a tax cut. Now, really? So we have to get a tax cut here. The interesting part about it is that at the same time that the mayor introduced his budget, just prior to that, the interim sheriff is making a plea for more police officers. And the candidates on the trail, and we're talking about that, are looking at more police officers on the streets. But again, a lot of the projects are already in play. The septic tank replacement process has already been going on throughout the city, particularly on the north side. There isn't a street that you can't turn on these days where some resurfacing isn't being done or something isn't being torn up. The only thing that still doesn't seem to get very much movement, and I don't see anything new in this budget, is, of course, the issues over on McCoy's Creek in the Mixontown area that's still a subject to flooding, and nothing has moved faster on this after all of these years of talking. But I don't expect very much changes to take place within the city council, given the leadership that we have this year, going into this year. I don't expect very much movement. I think the mayor will get the majority of what he's proposing in the budget. It'll be pretty much business as usual.
Jeff in Riverside emails the show, despite all the fanfare from the tax cut, I do not look forward to a decrease in my property taxes on either my homesteaded property or the non-homesteaded properties in the city. I expect they will both increase by 3 or 10%, the maximum amounts allowed. Jim Piggott.
And I think exactly that's what we're going to see happening. At least that's what others are telling me, that this decrease is not going to make that big of a difference. And I just go back to what some council members said, and they just either said, let's do a property tax cut. Carlucci was talking about this. I mentioned Joyce Morgan. That people can actually see that there will be some benefit to this if you're going to do this, because what inflation is causing, what's happening is really disruptive for them. That's what they would like to see. I did want to kind of jump in on something that David was talking about too when we were talking about the school board and that tax coming on. Mayor Curry was asked about that. Will you support that? In the past, he has. And he just said he's laying low on that. He didn't really want to answer that particular question. I thought that was interesting because those are really going to kind of offset each other if you do this cut. and then you do an increase of that for teachers, that's what we're going to see happen.
On Facebook, Martha says, thanks for the review on this. Will we finally make a concerted effort to update our downtown and north on Main? If you're just tuning in, it's our Friday Media Roundtable. We're talking about the biggest stories of the week with Jim Piggott of Channel 4, David Bauerlein of the Times-Union, and regular contributors Charles Griggs and Fred Matthews. And you, 549-2937 to join us now. Also making headlines this week, the candidates running to replace Duval County Sheriff Mike Williams have been making the rounds lately at a series of forums across the city. TK Waters is the only Republican in the race, and he spoke recently with Fred about his campaign.
I think law enforcement in Duval County, I think we have really good relationships. I always think there's always room for improvement. And we strive every single day. I know I have in my entire career to get as close as I can to my community and be as close and let everybody know the passion that we have for this community and saving lives and taking care of folks.
Fred Matthews, tell us more about your conversation with TK Waters, who is certainly the choice of outgoing Sheriff Mike Williams, who faced a residency flap over living out of the county. He's the only Republican in the race. Several Democrats are running and hoping to upset the Republican power balance in Jacksonville. Tell us about Waters, his campaign, and his priorities for sheriff.
Well, his campaign is strategic and it's pretty straightforward. As being the only Republican in the race, and of course, as we now all know, there will certainly be the next sheriff of Duval County will be African American. It proposes a pretty stark choice between he and the other candidates in the race. TK was hounded a bit because he couldn't give any interviews until he officially retired. So it came off, and when they did catch him, of course, on camera, he came off a bit gruff as he was going to the Beaches Pier for the opening there. He came off a bit gruff. So he was more than happy to do these interviews, and that's why he's been all over the television networks for the last week to do it. He came off as very knowledgeable, in-depth knowledge, probably because he's just retired from the sheriff's office, has been involved in a lot of the spokesman activities, the shootings, all of that. He's been deeply involved in. He will be, if he were to get elected, even in this run, he will be pretty much a no-nonsense guy. He is that. He delves into the weeds. He knows what's going on. And interesting enough, to the question of why are you Republican, his reply was, because the Democrat Party is just not where I am. It's not, it doesn't speak to me or for me, which is a key question, because a lot of folks will be asking that since the other four candidates in the race are all Democrats. And that's a key issue for him. And an interesting thing, given where we are in politics in Jacksonville at this time. This will be yet another leadership position, if he were to get elected, where all of the top Democrats, all the top Republicans, most of them are going to be African-American Republicans.
The other candidates running are Lakeisha Burton, Wayne Clark, Tony Cummings, and Ken Jefferson, a former colleague of yours, Jim, at Channel 4. Fred Matthews, we saw 5 shootings in 10 hours over the weekend. Homicides have ticked down somewhat, but they're starting to increase again. The candidates running for sheriff are all being asked how they're going to deal with gun violence. And at the same time, there has been a question about TK Waters' residency. It recently emerged that he had apparently, according to Channel 4, been living in a city park, I believe. What does he have a fixed address? He has told reporters that he lives in Jacksonville. Of course, that's why Mike Williams stepped down, because we learned through an investigation at the Jacks Tributary that Mike Williams was no longer living in the county.
Well, he does have a fixed address now. Nobody's going to be crazy enough to do that again, and especially since he's running for the office. Now, as many of us know, the police officers' addresses are not listed publicly for safety reasons. The other thing about the park address is that a number of officers over the years have taken part-time jobs up until the time. In fact, up until the time that we got our own, the school board got its own police force, it would not be unusual for them or even for any of the public parks to allow police officers to stay on the campus in one of these little huts for safety reasons, and that way they can patrol the grounds when they're off duty from their regular police job. So that's not new business. So it's not new business there. It's just new business as far as the public is concerned.
But it's unusual.
With these shootings,
it's right. I know it's unusual, particularly for somebody in the upper echelon to be living in a trailer, even to be moving out. But you have to think of the residency requirement, and that was our question at Channel 4. And we found that out, like, we're going, really? Because what I understood always, those officers almost had to show a need to live in those trailers, and that many of them do. And as you mentioned, they're supposed to be patrolling the park at night. I don't know if TK Waters was actually patrolling at night.
Well, keep in mind, Jim, that up until this point, there wasn't a requirement. As far as I know, now you may know better than me, but up until this point, there wasn't a requirement for officers to have to reside in Duval County. Now that he's running for sheriff, and that he formally did it, and remember, he held that till the very last minute for these very same reasons, because all of them were kind of taken aback by the Mike Williams scufflaw. So there was a requirement for line officers to live in Duval County. Mm-hmm. Now that he's running, he's got to make sure that everything's in place, and hopefully we'll see the address pop up on his candidacy form here soon.
Yeah.
Let me just say, how concerned are you folks about gun violence in Jacksonville? Who would you like to see become the next Duval County sheriff? Lots of candidates in the race, and you're going to be voting on this soon, next month. It's 549-2937. Give us a call. Bill emails the show, the fact that there are still 4 Democrats in the race shows how dysfunctional the local Democratic Party is. Instead of strategically falling in line like the Republicans, they're diluting the Democratic vote. Charles Griggs.
Yeah, so that's really an issue as well. To be honest, on the conversation on TK Waters is that he's probably, as you go around and you listen to these candidate forums and some of the performances they're doing out in the public, TK has probably been not the one who hasn't shown up to the most of them, but he's in the game. But as you listen to the stance and the positions from these candidates, he's probably the one who's least likely to shake things up at JSO. That's apparent, and the one who is most likely to govern like Mike Williams did. So,
you see the other candidates as making more substantive changes to JSO.
All of the other candidates have said, on the record, that they are looking to make substantial change in terms of how they look to reform JSO. So with that being said, Mike Williams' predecessor, he's more of a protege of Mike Williams, and so that's not really a criticism, but that is just the way it is. And we saw that previously when Mike Williams ran for sheriff on the heels of John Rutherford. So there is a constituency out there who would rather see things stay the way they are, but there are people out there who want to see JSO reformed. So that's the choice that voters are going to have to make when it comes time during the election.
Yeah, David Barrowline, in the wake of Black Lives Matter protests, we saw those in this city, and national calls for criminal justice reform, which have echoed here in Jacksonville. Will the voters hear that message, or will they opt for the status quo?
Well, status quo is always a strong undertow in any election. When TK Waters talks about police having a good relationship with the community, one thing that came out with the Safer Together committee workshop that the city council had last year was this real gap between how police view their relationship and really with the Black community and how the Black community views police, and that there's a higher level of distrust among the Black community than sometimes the police recognize or acknowledge. And so, to the extent that there's changes, how do you do that? How do you do something beyond rhetoric to make a change in that dynamic, which is longstanding? I think that's one thing that we're listening to among the council candidates. As far as violent crime goes, that has been a big problem in the city for a long time. And obviously, there's many more police officers now. That's probably good for reducing property crime and some of the nonviolent crime, but the violent gun crime seems to be a different matter in terms of getting to the root of it.
How concerned are you about gun violence in Jacksonville? 5492937. What do you want to see the next sheriff do to make this a safer city? Give us a call. Tom on the west side. Hi, Tom.
Good morning. What I want to see in a sheriff's candidate is one that's going to arrest the continuing bloat of the budget for the sheriff's office. We keep seeing the budget go up and up, and the results have not yet seemed to warrant that.
Let's talk about the police budget for a minute, guys. You know, and thank you, Tom. Jacksonville's not unique. Police budgets, public safety budgets are usually the biggest line item for any city. And the budget just gets bigger every year.
37 million more this year is what they're wanting to do for that. A lot of that's going into, at least what they're proposing, is for technology, like looking at ways to unlock cell phones and that type of thing. As I'd mentioned, we're not, we always hear, oh, we're hiring more police officers. Not really in this budget, but a lot of that is going for that. And we're trying to see, you're right. And what some are asking, is it paying off? Is that what's happening? Are we seeing a crime reduction? Of course, they said crime had come down, and you had mentioned, Melissa, we're starting to see an increase again, too. So those are very legitimate questions.
Fred Matthews, what about this? Voters are of two minds. They want a safe city, but they don't want to pay more in taxes. They complain about bloated budgets, but at the same time, if you have a problem in your neighborhood, you expect a police officer to show up.
No one's complaining about the sheriff's budget. All of the candidates that I've talked with, all of them have indicated what amounts to, when their time comes, of course, to propose a new budget from the police office, from the sheriff's office. All of them are talking about the need for more officers in order for them to do the kind of community policing that they want to do and that they hear the community wants them to do. They simply don't have enough officers to get out of the car and walk the neighborhoods as they have. Several of the candidates talked about that. Obviously, given the amount of officers, I think we have roughly about 1,800 or so officers outside of the corrections and all of that. They simply, all of the candidates indicated they simply don't have enough officers to do the kind of coverage of this city that they need to have to get the kind of community help that they need in order to solve a number of crimes. Now, none of them are indicating that will necessarily lower the gun violence issue that we have. They all recognize that the gang problem we have has morphed from what it was 20 years ago, in that we just don't have black gangs. We have other ethnic group gangs here in Duval County that are involved in all kinds of things, from trafficking, from human trafficking to drug trafficking. So, but all of them are indicating they need more officers. They'll be proposing to get more officers so they can get into the neighborhood. So we're not going to be looking at a cut from the sheriff's office for quite some time.
Yeah. 1 second, Charles. Hold that thought. 5492937, Tyrona on the west side. Tyrona, good morning.
Good morning, Melissa. Good morning to the panel as well. Tyrona Cartmurray, and I'm running for City Council for District 9. And I called in because Mr. Grigg, he happened to mention the McCoy's Creek project, which is also known as the Emerald Trail. So he talked about the fact that there's flooding there, and yes, there is. I know that with the Emerald Trail, it's not just going to be a bike path and beautiful waterways, but it's also serving a purpose as far as drainage, providing drainage for the McCoy's Creek Boulevard, McCoy's Creek area, North Riverside. So we have to keep in mind that the McCoy's Creek, it had been reduced to probably less than half of its size. So the current Emerald Trail project is going to return the creek to its normal size so that it will allow it to have the water capacity that it has normally had, so that will reduce flooding. It won't eliminate flooding completely, it will reduce flooding. And we also have to keep in mind about the McCoy's Creek. It is directly affected by the St. Johns River, and it flows into the St. Johns River underneath what was formerly known as the Times Union Building. So with that being said, we have to the project is underway. We know that the McCoy's Creek Boulevard, the road itself, has been demoed, and now it's just a grassy plain. And in addition to the McCoy's Creek needing to be restored to its original size, we have to bear in mind that along McCoy's Creek, there used to be some dumping. So we also have to look at the environmental impacts regarding that particular creek. So it's being worked on, and that money, we should also keep in mind the fact that that extra 6 cents that's on our gas, that tax, is going millions of dollars from that tax is going towards the rebuilding of that area.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's a candidate for council, Tyrona Clark, calling in. Charles Griggs.
Yeah, I was just going to just remark on the sheriff's budget. It's all nearly 7.5% increase to the budget. There are more officers coming in, and the challenge is, though, for those people who see police JSO as in some cases, over policing their communities, they don't necessarily want to see more police officers. They want to see people representative of crime prevention, right? And they want to see those resources go to things like having people to do mental health counseling and people who can come into the community and help build relationships with JSO and law enforcement. And
as you mentioned, the Democratic candidates would go more heavily in that direction, perhaps, if one of them were elected sheriff.
Well, if one of them were elected sheriff, now I can't speak for the candidates, but I think that's been part of the conversation, is to look at how you can redirect some of those funds to do different things other than enforce the law. But JSO is decidedly a law enforcement agency, right? So they're not really in the business of prevention, and the way that they operate speaks to that. So and again, that's just the way they operate. I mean, so what people are looking for, and especially people in the Black community are looking for, are better relationships where they can feel comfortable and respected by JSO. And if that's not occurring, even under this budget cycle, even with an increase, then they're still going to be disappointed. They're still going to be seeing to get the same thing that they've gotten previously from previous law enforcement, in the past. So the budget increase means nothing if you're not connecting with people in the community who want to feel respected because they're paying taxes as well. So.
Melissa, that on that, because when I was talking to Acting Sheriff Ivey, he was saying a lot of that money is going actually to the jail because of the corrections officers. He was telling me that they were so short, having a hard time hiring those officers to do that. They got to offer more money. And, we're always talking about police on the street, but apparently that's where a lot of the problem is now, is with the jail and staffing over there.
Interesting. 549-2937, talking public safety on the show with our Friday Roundtable. Keith in Ortega. Hello, Keith. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. I'll try to be concise. I'm just curious why socialized medicine is never mentioned when it comes to curbing violent crimes. I think that's, besides common sense gun laws, in my opinion, they so wants to curb violent crime before they have to deal with it. I think they should be more supportive of socialized medicine and the mental health care that would come along with that.
What are you talking about in terms of more people having health insurance, that would help bring down crime rates?
Yes, I'd like to see people have better and more easy and cheaper access to the mental health care that would come along with socialized medicine, and that would help curb these violent crimes that I assume JSO wants to stop at the root. Okay.
Yeah, Jim mentioned the jail. Thank you, Keith. David Bauerlein, the primary mental health facility in Jacksonville is sadly the Duval County Jail. The police don't like that. Mental health professionals don't like that. Police are unnecessarily distracted away from their core mission, sometimes dealing all the time with people who have mental health issues. When mental health professionals say there are other ways that we could handle those kinds of problems more efficiently in this city. What about that argument?
Yeah, and you hear that argument made as well from the JSO itself, which is that they would like to see more mental health counselors, and they have added some of that to their responding officers going out to calls and being able to identify whether this is someone who really needs mental health counseling as opposed to putting them in the jail. And that would be a way to create a more efficient system, get help where it's needed. The issue there is that, and it came up in the most recent campaign for the special election between Nick Howland and Tracy Polson was, the idea that if you put more of those people on the force or helping police, then you're by definition reducing money that could otherwise be sent to hire police officers. So that remains a big debate to be had. But if you talk to the police, if you talk to council members, they like that idea of doing more of that. Whether it's going to happen without grant funding and all that kind of stuff is interesting to see in the coming budgets.
Thanks for all the comments, guys. Another big story from the week. Thousands of local voters got letters in the mail this week telling them they need to update their voting records. If they want to request a mail-in ballot, they either need to go online or call the Duval County Supervisor of Elections office. Supervisor of Elections Mike Hogan says the new requirement does not affect their status as registered voters. Still, though, some voters, particularly senior citizens who would prefer to vote by mail, have expressed concern about whether this will make it more difficult for them to vote. Mike Hogan emailed the show about this the other day, letting us know that they were required to make that change due to the Florida legislature passing a comprehensive election law last year. That law is being challenged in court by groups who say it is making the right to vote more difficult for some Florida voters. Okay, let us know your thoughts. Did you get one of these letters in the mail? We've heard from a lot of you about that this week. 5492937. Jim Piggott, we've heard from some voters who've been registered to vote for decades, never voted by mail, never had a problem with their registration, got this letter out of the blue, and were somewhat taken aback.
I think a lot of voters, there's going to be a lot of interest in this upcoming with the primary and the November election. Not only with this, but, what's going to be happening with all these new elections on drop boxes, changes like that. No changes yet, but I keep asking Mike Hogan, what can we expect? And
he'll be on the show next week, by the way.
At times, they're questioning, where do we stand on this? But they're trying to follow the rules, and that's what we're hearing. We have to do this. And when voters call me or they check, I just say, you can always call, you can always go online, check the status on that. But I know it's more difficult, particularly for older voters that are just used to it, like myself. I mean, I have it down to a T of what I do. And when I get something like that, and I didn't get one of those letters, but I question those things too.
Yeah, Charles Griggs, voting rights and voting advocacy groups say these kinds of changes in the state law are presenting unnecessary hurdles to some voters. What about that concern? And it is being legally challenged. Some aspects of the new statewide voting law has a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, absolutely. What complicates things is that people are receiving this information right before an election. Any change or potential change in the way, you vote, like Jim just mentioned, he has a routine, right? Causes anxieties and gives people, may give voters pause as they approach an upcoming election. I know when I receive information in the mail from Supervisor of Elections Office, it triggers me, right? So because I want to make sure, especially with all of the laws, the changes that have been going on recently over the years, that we want to make sure we're getting it right. But there are people out there who they've been voting the same way every year for decades, right? And they sort of taken this privilege for granted, and they feel like they can just, use the same process they've been using, whether it's vote by mail or early voting or voting in person, as their status quo, and then they get to the point where they find out their vote didn't count. So we sympathize with the Supervisor of Elections Office for not having enough time, but we also feel like there should be a larger campaign in order to make sure the citizenry understands what changes are being made and how they should approach them.
Yeah, Fred Matthews, Florida's dozens of supervisors of elections, Mike Hogan included, have all spoken with one voice and said that the 2020 election in Florida was secure, well-run, free and fair. They were not in favor of these comprehensive changes, which are viewed by many groups as unnecessary. Governor Ron DeSantis said they were done in order to shore up confidence in elections. At the same time this is happening in Jacksonville, we've been watching the January 6th hearings in Washington, dramatic hearings just last night about former President Trump's failed attempt to overturn the election in 2020 based on false claims that it was stolen from him. And so these local officials on the ground here in Florida are reacting to this climate of disinformation and falsehoods about the security of Florida elections. They are required to implement these changes, but they don't necessarily agree that they're needed.
Well, they may not agree they're needed, but as you said, they are pretty much required to get this information out to voters, to have them to verify their eligibility, to update their signature if necessary, address, all of those. I got one of the letters that came to my house. And, what would also be helpful, this should be a call.
Well, hang on a minute, Fred. How you've been voting in this county for how long, and how do you vote?
Ever since I came back from the Air Force, 40 years now.
Oh, wow.
So,
and do you vote in person, by mail?
I vote in person. I
Okay.
vote in person.
But you have to go and check your registration for the first time, it sounds like.
Well, yeah, but I mean, for me, it's not a big deal. But for a lot of my senior peers, having to go online and check it, which is where you can do it first of all to make sure you're in everything's okay and you're voting at the same place, it gets to be rather daunting. And anytime they get a letter from any government agency, the city of Jacksonville or the feds, just a bit of panic sets in. Why am I getting this? And they often don't even want to open it. They give it to somebody else to open because they're afraid of what it says. And that's what's taking place in many places around the county and the country, is that the local supervisor of elections are required to get this information out. But this should serve as a call to arms for groups like the Northside Coalition, the League of Women Voters, and even the Supervisor of Elections Office. Do some PSAs. Tell people what they're getting and what's happening and what's available to them. Don't be remote. Thankfully, Mike's going to be on your show next week to talk about this, but a more aggressive stance by Supervisor of Elections that are interested in helping folks would be supremely helpful in getting the word out and allaying a lot of the fears.
549-2937, Alice in Arlington. Hi, Alice. Go ahead.
Good morning.
Did you get a letter?
Because yes, I did. In fact, I've had at least three letters.
Really?
And the first one I got 6 to 9 months ago that said I had to turn it in for my signature. And I thought, what if I do the letter a little bit differently? I didn't know what to think of it, and so I set it aside, and it got lost. And then I got another letter saying I had to fill out all these forms, it's like registering to vote. And I've been in Duval County for almost 50 years, 48 years, and I have voted in every single election except maybe one minor election in the last 48 years. And I don't understand it. I taught at Duval County school system for 38 years, and I taught for 40 years in this at Clay County also. And I don't understand why all of a sudden they need to know all this information about me, because I have the same house, the same phone number, and I'm the same person.
Wow. Thanks, Alice. David Bauerlein. That gives you an idea of how this is being received from some voters anyway.
Sure, exactly. The ground keeps shifting under their feet, and they kind of wonder why. I think Daniel Henry, the Duval County Democratic Party chairman, had a pretty interesting take, which is, people just going on, trying to live their lives. And every year they have to deal with some change in election law they don't understand how it impacts them or not. Now, the most important point of this is that if you got one of the letters, you're still registered to vote. You're not at risk of losing your ability to vote. It's a matter of providing that information. So if you want to go online to request a mail-in ballot or change your your party registration or your address, or if you want to do that over the phone, the supervisor says we need to have that information already on file so we can do that transaction.
Yeah.
But some
call
people think
them,
the
go
worst.
online. Call them or go online. Unfortunately, not everyone has access to the internet. If you don't, give them a call. In St. Johns County, check your polling place. Those have changed recently. Omar in Duval County. Hi, Omar.
Hello, good morning. I believe it's a big plot that's going on across the country to make sure that what happened January 6th and before with the last election and them not having.
Well, there's no. I mean, not to cut you off. Just so people are aware, the election laws were passed according to the governor and the legislature to shore up confidence in the elections. To be clear, Florida had a free, fair, and clean election. So these new laws have been criticized under that aspect. Go ahead, Omar.
That is true. That is true. But I do believe that they are doing this, especially him creating this police force to investigate any claims coming out of polling places. All that is just them making sure that they have the means to do what they want to do if things don't go their way in the next election. That's my opinion.
Thanks for your opinion. Again, I hope we've given the facts on the law. We understand opinions and emotions are strong. Linnell in Duval County. Linnell with the League of Women Voters are calling in. Hi, Linnell.
Hey, good morning, and thank y'all for really talking about this morning. I did hear the League of Women Voters mentioned on the air, so I am going to respond. Hey, we highly recommend that the Duval Supervisor of Elections makes every effort to communicate with these 38,000 plus folks who received a letter from him. Some may have been suspicious. The lady who spoke earlier talked about, her concerns about the letter that she got. But we were told that the majority of these people may be senior citizens. And we would recommend that the Supervisor of Elections reach out to AARP. We have 19 senior centers across the city. Also on buses, reach out to churches. A lot of our seniors still do attend church, whether virtually or in person, but also pharmacies. These are a number of places where seniors tend to frequent, and they would be great places for them to get information out and ask for community support to actually make people aware of what's going on so they trust these letters when they receive them and they actually act on them. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your civic engagement, Linnell, with the League of Women Voters, and for calling in. All right, folks, it was a busy discussion, but there's always a few stories that might have escaped wider attention. So it's time to do a quick trip around the horn and get to our lightning round. I'll start. I know. I love that sound effect, too. The World Golf Hall of Fame is packing up and moving out of St. Augustine, sadly, up to Pinehurst, North Carolina, the end of an era down there. Fred Matthews, what's on your mind?
Nikki Fried gave no ground in the Democratic debate with Charlie Crist. If he thought he was going to get a friendly debate, he didn't get one. And Nikki Fried is still gunning for the governorship.
Thanks for that. Yeah, that debate last night. Charles Griggs.
Yeah, the state of Florida issued 59,000 checks to families around the state who really didn't know they were coming. So $450 checks to those families who, in particularly, they are receiving TANF funds already from the state of Florida.
Yeah, helping them with extra bills.
Extra bills, back to school and all.
David Bauerlein.
So I like a good pun as much as the next person. So at City Hall this week, they had a sort of adoption of kitties, and they called City Hall Kitty Hall. So I enjoyed it. It was a nice break from coming out of the mayor's budget address to see that happening.
You could use a little break. And last, but certainly not least, Jim Piggott.
Lightning round's new to me on this. So the only thing that I did see this morning is Jacksonville is one of the 10 sweatiest cities.
Oh, I did see that.
There was a report on that, and I was like going, well, given the weather here today, I can definitely see that and smell that.
That's right. Well, I so appreciate you all staying cool with us on the show. Thank you, Fred Matthews, Jim Piggott, Charles Griggs, and David Bauerlein for a great discussion. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Marie.
Thanks, guys. When we come back, what does it mean to be well? A new exhibition at Yellow House takes a closer look. That's coming up. We'll be right back.
examining the latest healthcare headlines with our monthly medical roundtable. I'm Dr. Joe Servin. Join me tomorrow at 4 for What's Health Got to Do with It, only on WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville.
On the next Fresh Air, 2 Emmy nominees from the HBO series Barry. The show's creator, SNL alum Bill Hader, has 3 nominations for Best Actor, Writer, and Director of a Comedy Series. Henry Winkler, who became famous as the Fonz on Happy Days, is nominated for Best Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series. Join us
today at 1 on WJCT News 89.9.
Next time on 1A, another J6 hearing breaks down a very fateful 187 minutes. Also,
as president, I have a responsibility to act with urgency and resolve when our nation faces clear and present dangers.
Joe Biden uses the power of the presidential pen to tackle climate change, and the House moves forward with a bipartisan plan to protect same-sex marriage.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, what exactly does it mean to be well? That's a question that we've all been focused on since 2020, especially, or 2020. How long has this pandemic going?
2020, you've got it.
Yeah, been going on. It feels like forever. A new exhibition opening at Yellow House tomorrow is answering that question. Here in studio, Hope McMath, director and founder of Yellow House. Hi, Hope.
Hi, Melissa. Good morning.
Good to see you. And on the line, illustrator Ed Hall, whose amazing cartoons are much beloved, not just here in Jacksonville, but around the country. And his work is featured in this exhibit. Hi, Ed.
Hey, Melissa. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's great to talk to you. So the question around this is, what does it mean to be safe, healthy, and whole? Hope McMath, what inspired this new exhibition?
Well, some of it certainly came out of COVID. You know, I think the pandemic revealed so much about what we each need to be physically well, mentally well, but also, you know, this idea of personal wellness and its connection to society's wellness and our sort of collective needs. And so it really sort of evolved out of the pandemic, but deals with topics that are much broader than just COVID, though COVID is definitely represented in the exhibition.
Mm-hmm. And Ed Hall, tell us about your cartoons, your illustrations. I'm a huge fan of your work, have been for many years. What are you going to be showing at this exhibition?
Well, I think there's 18 color prints in a wide variety of topics, too. A lot of evergreen topics. And, you know, environment, gun control, LGBT issues. But Hope's a great curator, and I always trust her implicitly to pick really good stuff, and she did this time.
Yeah. Yellow House is a meeting space and a place where you curate shows. Who else is featured? What else are we going to see?
So we actually have 7 visual artists and 1 poet. Most of them are from the Jacksonville area, though we do have some artists from Gainesville and Tallahassee also represented in the exhibition. Some of the works are highly personal. Sandra Murphy Pack is an artist based in Gainesville who I've known for several years, who was diagnosed with ALS several years ago, which meant that her way of making art had to evolve. And so she actually paints with her feet, and she paints these beautiful abstract images that, in my opinion, when I'm looking into them, I feel like I'm looking into the universe. They're just really beautiful. And then there are artists that are taking up more social issues. Nina Yagual specifically focuses on what does it mean to take care of community. And some of her work deals with like divesting in police funding and what does it mean to take that funding and put it actually into the needs of the people. Barbara Colacello, who many people know as a writer and an actor, during COVID, she experienced brain fog and she turned to watercolor as a means to both process what she was going through, but also find healing in it. And so we are displaying a collection of those works as well.
Ed Hall, how do you use your art? You're a syndicated political cartoonist to get at the themes that we're living through in this time of COVID, because it deals with health, it deals with politics, it deals with culture. You've got a lot to play around with.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I'm part of the reason I'm in this show is because I've been dealing with colon cancer since 2016, and if you layer COVID on top of that, it's created a whole nother layer of issues for me to have to deal with, including my health scares and whatnot. But I've really used my art and my cartooning to help me to strengthen myself, And I think if you talk to most of the artists in this show, they'll say that art has helped them get through, and that's really kind of, for me, it's been a godsend to have it and, be able to work through it.
I'm so sorry you've been dealing with that, Ed. Any cancer patient or anyone who's immunocompromised has to be especially careful. It's why you are joining us virtually today. What has been the biggest challenge for you?
Well, I would say, not being able to, mingle with my friends, family, the public, I have, though, managed to have a one-man show, which was nice earlier this year. And then, of course, being in this show is really nice. But having contact with the public is always important for political cartoonists, because you really want to try and get the feel of, your community. And that's been hard.
Oh, absolutely right.
Yeah.
We've all been isolated from each other, and people need to get back together. They'll be doing it at your location, but it's been there's a lot of pain associated with
There
that.
is, and part of what we are holding space for is not just the sort of reimagining of the lessons that we've learned through the pandemic and how to be stronger and healthier together, but also to hold space for the grief and the loss. And of course, that's not just associated with the pandemic, but I think we are all carrying that kind of weight. And so though there's a lot of beauty and joy in this exhibition, it's also one that very clearly and boldly recognizes that we have wounds to heal. And I happen to believe, as the artists in this show do, that art gives us a way to do some of that stitching of those wounds.
Well, congrats on the 5th anniversary of Yellow House. And as the exhibition opens, you'll also have a Be Well get together.
Yeah, so we're going to have the opening this weekend, Saturday night from 6 to 8. But on the 13th of August, we have a community wellness gathering where the show will be open for free. And we're partnering with the Center for Arts and Medicine and Amplifier, which is a great national organization that does arts and social justice work. So we'll have a vaccine clinic, a mobile vaccine clinic at Yellow House. We'll have free produce for folks and lots of ways for people to engage.
Check it out. Hope McMath of Yellow House, syndicated political cartoonist, illustrator Ed Hall. Thanks so much for being with us, both of you.
Thank you. Be well.
Thank you.
And that's our show. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure to join us today at noon for the Florida Roundup, where we round up the biggest stories of the week across the state. I'm Melissa Ross. Have a great weekend.
Be okay, be okay, be okay. I just wanna be okay today. I just wanna be okay, be okay, be okay. I just wanna be okay today. I just wanna feel the day, feel the day, feel the day. I just wanna feel something new. I just wanna feel something today. I just wanna know today, know today, know today. Know that maybe I will be okay. Maybe I will be okay. Know that maybe I will be okay. Maybe I will be. Know that maybe I will be okay.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided